CI Chit Chat, everyone. The 100th episode of the CI Chit Chat. It's kind of a big deal that we've been doing this, beating the drum for a long time. I did a quick look. The first CI Chit Chat was back in October of 2023. So we have been beating the drum. We haven't done it every week, but just about every week since late 2023. And we just continue to try to put the message out, try to educate, try to share the latest. Sometimes it's no update. Sometimes it's really exciting updates. But we've been continuing to beat this drum. And anyone that's new, CI is carbon intensity. And on the farm, we think of it as your carbon footprint per bushel. And that's important because our footprint or our greenhouse gas emissions, our carbon intensity on the farm is part of the supply chain's carbon intensity. And particularly, we're talking about biofuels because our footprint from our corn and soybeans is a component of the carbon footprint of the biofuel that's being produced with our crops, namely ethanol and biodiesel and renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel and what have you. And that's important because of the 45Z tax credit. Still has a chance of being able to, provide that carrot here to incentivize decarbonizing the biofuels. And 45Z was part of the Inflation Reduction Act back in August of 2022. So August 2022, this thing got launched. We started doing some work on it. And like I said, we started doing these chit chats in October of 2023, just trying to spread the word and educate ourselves and try to educate our audience. So thanks to everyone that has been there this whole time. We still are not out of the fight yet, that's for sure. But man, it feels close. It feels like any time this can happen, and we got the guy who's got his thumb on it even more than I do, and it has the ends right there in DC, and I believe he's calling in from DC here today. So excited to have our special guest here for the 100th episode, Mr. Geoff Cooper, the president of the Renewable Fuels Association. He was a keynote at our Topsoil Summit this year and just rocked it. He had rave reviews last year. We just had to have him back, and it was great. The event went awesome. Thanks to everyone that was there. I think I've just about fully recovered from a whirlwind of multiple days of that event, and then I've been out on the road with him with a project that I'm involved with as well. But it's been a lot going on, but things are making progress. So, Geoff, maybe do a quick introduction to you and to the RFA, and then we'll kind of jump into some other details of what's the latest going on, especially with 45Z.
Sure. Thanks, Mitchell. Thanks for having me this morning. And thanks for having me at the Topsoil Summit a couple weeks ago. That was a great event. I think very timely.
Yep.
It was good to see everybody, and especially great to hear from former Secretary Vilsack. So kudos to you and Diana for putting on a wonderful event. Um, the Renewable Fuels Association, for those that may not know, is the national trade group that represents U.S. ethanol producers. So our board members are exclusively companies that produce ethanol. We also have associate members who are vendors and suppliers to the industry. Continuum obviously is an associate member, a good example of our associate member class. But our goal, quite simply, our mission statement is to pursue policies and market development activities and frankly, public affairs activities to expand the production and use of renewable fuels and ethanol in particular. And so 45Z, of course, has been a top priority issue for us the last several years. There's been a lot of things happening in the policy space on biofuels, and maybe we'll get into some of the other things that have been happening, whether it's the renewable fuel standard volumes, year-round E15. Those are all things we talked about at the Topsoil Summit. But 45Z is sort of one of those issues that is remains a work in progress, as Mitchell said, and we are actively engaged with all of the agencies that have their fingers in the pot on 45Z, and that's what makes 45Z a little bit unique.
Mhm.
You got the renewable fuel standard, that's EPA's deal. They got the reins there, and it's their thing. With 45Z, you've got the Department of Energy involved when it comes to some of the CI modeling. You've got USDA involved when it comes to the ag practices and some of that. You do have the EPA involved in some respects of 45Z as well. And then, of course, it is a tax credit program. So Treasury
Yeah.
ultimately has, and IRS ultimately have the authority for administering the program. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on 45Z, and I think that's part of what has really complicated the rollout of this program.
Yeah.
But Mitchell, I'll stop there
No,
and we
that's
can get
that's
into.
that's great to tee it up, and so many moving parts. I do think that's part of what's made it complicated. Then, of course, the change of command, last January. So
Yep,
obviously that delayed things, and kind of the 6 month down period between January of 2025 and Big Beautiful Bill being written, July 4th last year, right at
right.
just about right at 12 months ago. And so that delayed things, and now it's like, hey, it's back on, and now
Yep.
it's kind of herding the cats once again. But progress is being made, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but in February, the IRS did write their preliminary rule, and or I call it a preliminary rule. There's a longer
Yep.
term to it, but a preliminary rule was written in February. The IRS took public comment. The IRS held a public hearing, of which, of course, RFA participated, of course, Continuum participated, and now the IRS is working towards a final rule. And
Correct.
that is supposed to integrate some of this feedstock component and the farmer component. That was fairly clearly, laid out as their intent anyway. Government
Yep.
loves these kind of words, right, Jeff? Like
Yep. Yeah.
intent. And we were joking at the Tops of Summit of the word Secretary Rollins has been using recently of the rule coming out being
Imminent.
imminent, that the rule is going to come out. It's like, well, what's that supposed to
Yeah,
mean?
we've heard very soon, we've heard imminent, we've heard any day now. I'd really like a date on the calendar that we could hang our hat on.
Yeah, I've found that government doesn't really like to have dates on the calendar, and even if they put a date on the calendar, it still doesn't really mean anything.
That's true.
But anyway, the IRS did get their rule out, and a lot of your producers are creating credits and stuff, but it's on other ways of decarbonizing, not the feedstock, not the
That's
farmer
right.
component. That piece is still not there. But you want to maybe speak to some of the experience so far of plants, because I think a lot of farmers are like, we see the headlines and like, oh wow, these guys are creating 45Z credits, and hey,
Yep.
there's some big sales that have been made. But can you explain, where is that coming from at
Yeah,
this juncture?
sure. Well, and I guess we should probably go back to January 1st of 2025 because that's the date that the law says
Yeah.
that the 45Z credit became available to producers of clean fuels, including ethanol producers. So by law, producers had the ability to begin generating 45Z credits on January 1st of last year. The problem was we didn't have the rules in place. We didn't have the guidelines or the details on exactly how to do that and exactly how to calculate the carbon intensity value. And of course, it's that CI value that drives the value of the tax credit. So we had very preliminary guidance and rules early last year in January of 2025. So the industry has, operated on that guidance, and IRS does allow that. So the industry operated on that guidance for calendar year 2025. And then, as Mitchell said, a year ago, Congress amended the 45Z program, made some very important changes to it in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. They, by statute, required the elimination of indirect land use change emissions from CI scoring. They also excluded or removed the eligibility of any clean fuels made from imported feedstocks outside of the US, Canada, and Mexico. So then Treasury had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to implement those congressionally directed changes. They
Hmm.
did so in this latest proposed rule that Mitchell mentioned that came out in February. So now we have, more details, more guidance, more flesh on the bone for 2026 claims. But we were still missing another very important piece, which again is the GREET model.
Yeah.
That's the model that is required by Treasury to calculate carbon intensity. So again, we had the new proposal out. That's great, but we didn't have a new model yet. Well, we finally got that a couple of weeks ago as well. And so these pieces, we talk about it like the 45Z is a big puzzle. And these pieces have been dumped out on the table, over the last couple of years, and it's sort of been up to us to put them together.
Yeah.
And we're putting more and more of those pieces together, but we are still missing some very important pieces before we can complete that puzzle.
Yeah.
But Mitchell's right. The typical ethanol producer has been generating 45Z credit last year and again this year using the guidance and proposals that are available from the IRS, working with tax professionals to make sure they're doing everything exactly right based on what we know. Uh, and so you are seeing that out there. And as Mitchell said, it's the CI scores today are strictly based on what is happening at the biorefinery gate and downstream of that. So if you're an ethanol producer that is reducing their natural gas consumption or offsetting fossil electricity with renewable energy certificates, that all counts toward their CI score. If they're using, combined heat and power or lower carbon electricity, if they're doing carbon capture and sequestration, which we do have a handful of plants that are doing that, that all figures into their CI score. But everything upstream of the biorefinery, everything happening on the farm, still is not monetizable by the ethanol producer. They have no way of baking in the CI of the feedstock. Today, corn corn is corn, according to the Treasury, and it doesn't matter what practices were used or where it was grown, it gets one score. And so that's how the industry's been operating this past year and a half. And as Mitchell said, we expect that to change as USDA guidelines and a few of these other pieces get dumped out on the table in the months ahead.
Yeah, and that, of course, for many of the folks on here, which we've got a nice blend here today of farmers and biofuel producers and industry folks. Nice blend on the chit chat here today. But that farmer, the feedstock piece is, of course, what where our focus is, and
Sure.
that's the puzzle piece that we're trying to bring to the table. I love that analogy because you're so right. And what's crazy to me too is to think of all the pieces even outside of ethanol and biodiesel and corn and soybeans. Like it is crazy
Oh yeah,
complicated
we haven't even
when you figure
scratched the
in,
surface with
oh,
RNG and some of the other things that are out there. Yeah.
meth. There's tons of other fuels that this thing applies to, but on the farmer piece, okay, so let's dig into that because that's really the pertinent one for this. So I think I talked about this at the summit a little bit, but this is the site that we monitor, and Geoff, correct me if we're wrong, but this is the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs site, part of the Office Management Budget, OMB, and that's who we've talked about. I call them the T crossers and I dotters. They're kind of the final people that got to review all of these different rules, and they got to cross the T's and dot the I's before the rules can go live. And this is the status, and this is the page that I refresh about 15 times a day, monitoring for the status to change from pending review to concluded, so that we know, hey, things are moving. And this is the technical guidelines for the production of regenerative ag biofuel feedstock, the USDA rule. They changed the name and the terminology a little bit from what the Biden USDA put out back in January of 2025 to now what Trump USDA, they're using this regenerative ag name rather than climate smart ag. It's just semantics. But this has been there since April 2nd, and if you look into here, it documents all of the meetings that are going on, and this is what needs to change. And it's like, man, it seems like what's going on, what's the holdup, and this is ultimately my understanding of what needs to happen next is OMB needs to give the final thumbs up, and for whatever reason, the thumbs up person must be on vacation or something. Because
Extended vacation.
the thumbs up person hasn't given the thumbs up yet. And when they give the thumbs up, then it's back over to USDA, who can publish the rule. And it seems like it's just tipped the final domino, and that's all we got to have. But am I wrong in that, Geoff, or what? What do you
No,
guys think?
that's exactly right. Once OMB, the Office of Management and Budget at the White House, is done with their review, they will release this rule back to USDA. USDA will take a day or two to clean it up, and then they'll publish it. They'll release it to the public. And along with this, as you guys probably know, this is the guidelines that talk about what practices are included, the supply chain management protocols, the MVR protocols. All of that is discussed in these guidelines, but it should also run parallel to the feedstock carbon intensity calculator, and those two things should be released at the same time from USDA, and then it's up to the Treasury to take that work and integrate it into the 45Z CF GREET model. So that's, more steps in this process that have to happen before it's fully baked in there.
That's right.
But yeah, the last stakeholder meeting that OMB did on these guidelines was at the end of May. So they've been done with stakeholder meetings and soliciting feedback. And we're not quite sure what is taking so long for them to release this back over to USDA.
Yeah, yeah. Looking here, it was May 26th. I think it was the Tuesday of Memorial Day week. And yeah, shoot, Continuum was the very first one of these meetings because now I like kind of know what I'm doing with these things. The first time I did one of these EO 12866 meetings, I had no idea what I was even doing. I'm like, oh, sure, request a meeting. That probably goes to nobody, and nobody is on the other side of this. But I had no idea, and had or we got selected for one of these meetings, and I'm like, I should probably figure out what these are. And then I realized, oh, these are actually kind of an important thing and kind of a big deal. I should probably prepare and study up on this. And but I do think we've got a pretty good grasp on pointing out items that they should be focused on, but actually providing a solution and a recommendation. And
Yep.
that's what drives me nuts about a lot of these other organizations or groups. They often point out problems, but they rarely provide a recommended solution, and that just kind of drives me bonkers. But anyway, but yes, these review meetings just about done, and what Geoff just said is, in that rule, what we anticipate anyway is updated feedstock calculator, so we'll know what practices are going to count and how many points can you move the needle for those practices. That's really what the farmer needs. Then the supply chain custody traceability, that's the mass balance versus book and claim, and then the audit protocols. I'm hearing that it's going to be basically the same as version 1, the ISO 14065 audits and stuff, and that's Continuum's bread and butter. I mean, that's the whole point of what we do here is verify the farmer data, get it third party audited by our auditors at Eco Engineers, so it's all super legit. And then we got trace it through the supply chain, and at the Topsoil Summit we announced a new company called the Depot, which is actually a new CI certificate marketplace being built to help facilitate all that. But yeah, it's really those key. But also I want to reiterate again what Geoff said. This is just the USDA putting out some rules. They actually don't have all the authority to influence the 45Z program. Instead, Department of Energy and Treasury have to put in some of the language to point to this rule and adopt that language. Now, the IRS in the preliminary rule back in February was quite clear that they are waiting for this. They called it out by name this time.
Yep.
And they specifically said, we want this USDA guidance to come out, then we intend on integrating it or language similar to it. Had some
Yep.
language along those lines. So I thought that was good that they didn't just point blank say we're going to do whatever USDA says, but they said we're going to let USDA get their stuff done, and then we're going to either integrate it full out or at least utilize it to draft the guidance. And that's why we have not just blindly advocated to utilize the USDA rule just point blank.
Yep.
Because I don't know what's in it, and I don't know that I agree with 100% of what's in it because I haven't seen it yet. So
Yeah, it's really hard to advocate for something that we haven't seen the details of. Now, I do think the interim rule that USDA put out and the what they called the beta version or sort of the draft version of the feedstock carbon intensity calculator, that stuff's all instructive. And I think it's helpful to kind of get a sense of where this is headed. But Mitchell's right. Until we see a final rule and a final feedstock calculator, it's impossible for anybody in this space to know exactly how this is all going to work.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the big frustrations for our folks is just the waiting game that we've been playing, trying to figure out exactly how this is all going to work. And back to one of my earlier comments, the Department of Energy is going to have a big role in taking what USDA finalizes and integrating it into a new version, a forthcoming version of the 45Z CF GREET model. I just got done saying, hey, we finally got the new GREET model out a couple weeks ago. That's great, but they're going to work on another version that ties in or sort of docks in the feedstock carbon intensity piece of this. And they say again they intend to get to work on that as soon as USDA gets something out. But we're probably looking at late summer, fall, and potentially even early next year before we have that next version of the GREET model that finally docks in the feedstock carbon intensity piece.
Yeah. I think that kind of time is. I've got my hopes up too many times in this deal, Jeff. So I'm thinking I'm going to delay the timing
Yeah, I
on any
think erring
clarity
on the
on
side
this.
of caution is probably smart.
I
I do think in discussions we've had with both USDA and DOE, again, their intent, or at least what they're saying to us, is that this would all be wrapped up and done and ready in time for planting season in 2027. So we wouldn't be playing the same game that we played
yeah.
when farmers were planting this year, wondering, what the heck is going on. So I think that's what they're aiming for. But there's, like I said, there's still several steps and a lot of work left to do to get that piece tied in.
I think on the farmer side, we'll have enough teeth within this USDA rule to move forward. And what Continuum is going to do is maintain the Department of Energy's latest feedstock calculator and the updated USDA calculator because it's the same data. We anticipate it's basically the same data that's going to run both calculations. We'll show both scores. We'll verify against both until it is adopted on which one are they going to use. And that goes to Tim
Yep.
Barak's question. Tim's a champ in the
Yep. I know
biofuel
Tim.
space, farmer, and on some boards and stuff. Tim says, what's the nature of the relationship between USDA and DOE? You were kind of just explaining it, but
Well,
yeah,
and I can, I can be maybe a little more candid on that. I mean, there has been a little bit of push and pull and a little bit of a tug of war between those two agencies on this piece. DOE had their own version of the feedstock carbon intensity calculator. Then USDA produced its own version of the calculator. There's been a lot of back and forth between the technical folks at those two agencies trying to figure out, what is the right version and exactly how to do this. And I think we'll see some of that continue to play out as USDA releases its final version of the calculator and its final guidelines. Then it becomes pardon me, DOE's job to take that and begin to integrate it with the GREET framework. And so there will be a lot of, at least we're hoping there will be a lot of interaction between those two agencies to get to the right place.
yeah, because it's the Department of Energy needs to integrate and basically adopt a 45Z CF FDCIC, and that was
That's
kind of
right.
laid out by Treasury. And Treasury will probably have somewhat of a vote, I assume, and Department of Energy gets the final kind of say so because they own the GREET model, and then of course
Yep.
USDA is going to be advocating for their thing, and there's going to be folks at Argonne advocating for their feedstock calculator. And on our side, my take is, hey, I need to know what's in the USDA calculator to know which one are we advocating for, or can we say, hey, it doesn't really matter. You can
Right.
use either one. Ultimately, for us, it's going to be which one's going to be a better carrot and which one's going to
Sure.
incentivize farmers, further, while still, of course, being scientifically bound and conservative. And I think they are, but
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting that there's a little bit of politics there, and I can explain it more on the details of the modeling and some of that when we have more time. But we do have a couple other questions coming in, and we're running short on time. But Bob Becker is on here, another champion in this space, and he's talking about his local poet plant. But let's talk about plants in general that already have very low CI scores. Because they've already got carbon capture or whatever it may be. How do you think farmers are going to be able to interact with some of those very low CI producers?
Yep.
What's the take on that?
Well, I think probably my suggestion would be once we have the final guidelines out and the final calculator, that probably provides an opportunity for farmers to get with their local facilities and say, okay, we've got the USDA work is done. We understand there's more that has to happen. DOE's got to pick this up and tie it into the Greek model. But that may be an opportunity for farmers to sort of ask their local ethanol producers how they're thinking about CSA and how they're thinking about a regenerative feedstock program. I will tell you from the ethanol producers' perspective, they're all looking at, and Mitch, you did a really nice job at the summit of laying out how the 45Z program is structured. It's not two pennies per additional point of CI reduction. This thing is a stair step program, and so you've got to cut 5 points of CI to get to the next step, and the steps are 10 cents per gallon. So ethanol producers are looking at this as, hey, how do I get to that next step? How close am I to that next step? And how many points do I need to shave off my CI score before I can get that next 10 cent, get into that next bracket?
Yeah.
And that will determine, how much regenerative feedstock they might think they need, or what other bells and whistles and levers and dials they can pull and turn to get to that next bracket. Um, that again, that's how folks are thinking about this. Some of them are very close to that next step. Some of them are not very close, and so buying a bunch of CSA feedstock may not be enough to tip them over into that next bucket, and therefore they're probably not going to pull the trigger on that.
That's right.
So it's just a lot of that's the thinking that is going on at the ethanol plants today. But yeah, I would recommend that once this USDA piece is out for public consumption, that might be an opportunity to engage with your local producer on how they're thinking about all this.
Yeah. And thinking out loud, Bob, I actually have we have developed a pretty cool decision making matrix and stuff that lays this out and integrates some of the anonymized farmer data in this to exactly what Geoff was saying. The ethanol plant can plug in what's their CI score today, how far are they from that next stair step, or maybe two stair steps or three, or we think the feedstock going full extreme could actually get you potentially up to 4 steps if the CI calculator remains, in line with the current Department of Energy's feedstock calculator. But yeah, what like Geoff's saying is you got to just get to that next jump because that next jump adds about 10 cents a gallon as long as you're meeting the other red tape. So you want to get to that next step, but you don't want to sit on that next step or else you're wasting money. You got to get just to the next step. And the good thing is now the biofuel producers have the updated GREET model that they need to know where their score is, where they anticipate it'll be for 2026. Then they're looking at opportunities to buy RECs, renewable energy credits. Those can get you to that next stair step versus what's the price and availability of verified CI certificates to get you to that next step. Or again, I think our opportunity is going to be to move the needle by even more than one step. But even those plants that have a score in the teens, remember they max this thing out once they get below a score of 2.5. Once you get to 2.5, that rounds down to 0. And that's really the target, is to get just below 2.5 to maximize this thing out. I think the key and Geoff, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these plants that are going to be close to maxing it out, I think if I'm in their shoes, what I would do is buy from a lower amount of farmers who have lower CI scores and more volume because I have less contracts to deal with, less headache to deal with, or buying from farmers that have their data organized versus trying to herd a bunch of cats. I would rather buy lower CI crop from fewer folks because that's going to move the needle further with less paperwork, with less headache. Versus, so what it'll do is, instead really of trying to buy from 75% of your farmers, just buy from super low CI crop from 20% of the farmers. That gets you the same weighted average outcome.
Yeah. And that's where the book and claim concept really comes back into play. Mitchell mentioned RECs, renewable energy certificates. They're called AECs in the 45Z program. And that's exactly the way that market has operated. As an ethanol producer, maybe right on the edge of getting to that next step. And so what they've been able to do is go into the market, buy some renewable energy certificates to offset their fossil electricity usage, and that kicks them into that next higher bracket. And again, fully book and claim system doesn't mean they have to have solar or wind hardwired to the
Yep.
facility. They can buy a REC from a renewable energy producer in Pennsylvania or Texas or California or wherever to sort of buy down their CI. And we think the best way for a CSA feedstock program to operate would be very similarly, where the farmer is the one selling these CI certificates that have been verified, validated
Yep.
on a registry, to a book trading platform of some sort. And the ethanol producer, whether they're in the Texas Panhandle or in Colorado or in North Dakota, can go onto this registry and say, "Hey, I'm going to buy the environmental
Yeah.
attributes from 3 million bushels of corn. Doesn't matter where it's grown. Doesn't matter where the corn ended up. I'm going to buy these attributes to get my CI score down and get it into that next bracket."
That's right.
That's really the way we see this could work, but it's got to be that book and claim, very flexible, decoupled, market-based approach. If instead USDA comes out and requires this kind of end-to-end traceability or even mass balancing, I think that's going to limit participation by both farmers and by ethanol producers.
Totally agree. And then it's also going to massively disrupt a lot of the livestock producers and other
Correct.
supply chains. It could be a real mess. So, yeah, book and claim is the answer to so many of these things. And we have all the infrastructure built out, ready, proven. It's like, man. And I hope that maybe the holdup, Geoff, at OMB is that they heard enough feedback of it needs to be book and claim that maybe they're trying to sort that out. Maybe
Well,
that's
I,
just
I
even
would
that.
sure hope so. I mean, we've
But
been beating that drum since the very beginning on
yeah.
this with USDA, with the Department of Energy, with Treasury, explaining to them that this is the way this really should work. Mitchell's right. We don't, we've spent 150 years in this country developing grain flows, and this market has evolved in a way that corn goes where it's needed and where it is most economical to send it. If that's the river terminal or that's the feedlot down the road, it should continue to flow to those places. But the farmer should be able to decouple the environmental attributes and sell those as a separate instrument. That solves a lot of problems. And yes, it may be somewhat more complicated than mass balance. We don't really think it needs to be, and we hope
I
that's
think it's
that's where
actually
this is all
easier.
headed. It it,
It's
it
actually
is
going to be
easier. Yeah.
easier. But anyway, but we just got to keep beating that drum. But we'll see. Okay, we're already over time. But last question because I think Alan's is good and kind of plays to this. Basically speaking to what do you think is going to happen here, Geoff? And is this going to fall apart? The secretary said it's imminent that it is going to come out. Do you believe her? Do you think this is going to work, or has the
Yeah.
ship sailed and this is a dead end?
No, I do think we are going to see the final guidelines from USDA, hopefully very soon, hopefully in the weeks or months ahead, along with that final feedstock carbon intensity calculator. I think that's a given. I think we can feel confident that we are going to see those products from USDA. I think where there's less clarity and less certainty is around what DOE does with that
Hmm.
information. Again, everything we've heard and what was in the Treasury's proposed rule is that they will take that work product from USDA and integrate it in a future version of the GREET model. The timing on that, as we talked about earlier, uh, again, their intent or what they've said they'd like to do is have that done before farmers get in the field in 2027.
Yeah.
I think there's a reasonably good chance that happens, and we do see a new model out late this year, early next year that does dock in the feedstock piece of this whole thing. Now, around book and claim and how and whether USDA and DOE and Treasury do that, I don't know. I think there's less certainty on that. They mentioned it in their interim rule and said, "Yeah, there's a lot of people are asking for this. We're not sure. It looks really hard, but we're sure going to keep pushing for that approach to this." And even if that's not what they immediately adopt in terms of a supply chain management approach, we do think there could be opportunities that they could tie in that sort of approach down the road. The challenge of this whole thing, of course, is this tax credit expires at the end of 2029,
Yeah.
right? So the clock is ticking, and investments are being made, decisions are being made based on the guidance that's out there now. There's not a whole lot of time for, bureaucratic sausage making. We need some answers on this stuff as quick as possible.
Yeah, and so where my head's at with this, and what I'm tasked with is it's held up at OMB right now. So sending some messages over to our elected officials and to whoever we got in DC, saying, "Hey, give a little nudge over there. Let's get this thing released, so at least we know the words on the page. Then we can go fight the next fight."
That's
Which is
right.
either going to be, "Hey, we like the words on the page. Get this adopted as fast as possible," or "Hey, change this word, delete this section, add this," providing some feedback, then adopt it. I think that'll be next. So, number one, get it out of OMB and get it released. Number two, figure out how to fight the next fight to get it adopted. But even getting this rule done through USDA at least gives farmers kind of, is this going to be a go or no go? Who is likely able to participate, if especially if it's mass balance or book and
Right.
claim? What practices should we be focused on? And I think it's going to give the farmer piece a lot of clarity to be moving forward. It'll give us a tremendous amount of clarity on how to update our software to be able to provide the rigor and the systems that are required, and let us continue to invest, in developing the infrastructure. But yeah, it's still going to be a battle ahead. But we'll keep pushing on OMB. I'll send some messages along, but that would be the thing for anybody that's listening. If you've got connection with your elected official, encourage them to send a note over to OMB saying, "Hey, there's this USDA technical guidelines for the production of regenerative ag biofuel feedstocks, basically the USDA's 45Z rule. Hey, give a little nudge to get that thing done. There's no reason that it should continue to be held up." So that's the task today, and then we'll go fight the next fight. But Geoff, we know you got all kinds of, you're fighting battles on lots of fronts, and you're in DC today. So good luck as you're continuing to fight the good fight out there. Hopefully, it's some fun stuff going on with getting ready for.
Well, I might go down to the reflecting pool and check that
Yeah.
out today.
Gosh, what a mess. Yeah, it's sad when we have to have security cameras on.
Yes, when you got
everything.
the National Guard is surrounding the reflecting pool, it's
Gosh,
crazy times.
that is just, yeah. It's a sad deal. It's really what it is. Like it's a time when we should be coming together, and then
Yep.
there's stuff. Anyway, appreciate you coming on, Geoff. We'll talk to you very soon, and I got some kindly worded messages to send here. So
All right.
appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. We'll catch you next week back here on the Chit Chat, and as soon as any movement happens, we'll be blasting it out there, and you all will know right away. So thanks everyone. Have a good one. We'll see you next time. Bye.